Welcome into the Cinema Literature Podcast, Episode 2. Here's what happened over the weekend in the movie world. We'll start with the box office report. Domestically, Annabelle Creation took the weekend with an estimated $35 million and worldwide take of $72 million, only on a budget of $15 million, so they probably already made their money back. Dunkirk, in its fourth week of release, made $11.4 million domestically for a total domestic box office of $153.7 million and a worldwide box office of $363.7 million on a budget of $100 million. Nut Job 2 Nutty by Nature only made $8.93 million in its debut against a budget of $40 million. So there's definitely going to be... they definitely lost some money on that one. Dark Tower, in its second week of release, dropped 59%, only making $7.87 million. Total domestic box office is $34.3 million. Worldwide box office is at $42.6 million against a budget of $60 million. The Emoji Movie, in its third week of release, made $6.5 million. It's now made $76.6 million worldwide against a budget of $50 million. Probably the biggest story is Sony. Sony with The Dark Tower and The Emoji Movie. Both of those movies are probably going to lose money. The Dark Tower hasn't made any money overseas, and after the terrible critical reception it had, it's not a big shocker that it's not going to make back that $60 million. Also, the Emoji Movie, which 2 years ago had a bidding war from all these studios, even though it's made $76 million on a $50 million budget, I doubt it's broken even because the amount of marketing that went into that movie and probably the price they paid to get the rights to the Emoji Movie, and it's one of the worst reviewed movies of the year, and it's falling fast, and just people aren't seeing it. Second biggest story is Annabelle Creation winning the weekend because with a lot of these micro budget horror films, they make their money in the first weekend of release normally, like all the time. With it having $72 million worldwide already on a budget of $15 million, they're making money on that movie no matter what. The first Annabelle, even though it wasn't received as well, made $256 million on a $6.5 million budget. And all these movies are in the Conjuring universe, which is produced by James Wan, who directed the 2 Conjuring films. And, I mean, they're just printing money. They're basically taking the model that Blumhouse production uses with their horror movies, like Get Out, Split, Insidious, just these movies. Hey, we're going to make a movie for $10 million or under, and we're going to release 6 of them a year, and we really only need 2 of them to succeed, and then we'll make our money back no matter what. Recently, Get Out was named the most profitable movie of the year. It's made $252.4 million on a $4.5 million budget. Split has to be one of the most profitable movies as well. It made $276 million on a $9 million budget. Oh, also, The Dark Tower... It's going to lose money, but Sony wants to have a sequel somehow. That's not going to happen. And they're supposed to make a TV series as well based on The Dark Tower. I don't see it happening because nobody is going to be attracted to that after just the horrible performance of this movie. But last but not least, with the box office report, Dunkirk making $11.4 million in its fourth weekend. Its first weekend, it made $50 million. I mean, this could be a movie that just hangs around basically until it comes out September 8th. It could hang around just still making money. And honestly, the movie could make another $100 million, not domestically, but worldwide before it's all... I mean, that could be a $500 million movie because it just keeps word of mouth keeps spreading, keeps making good money. I mean, it's not like it's down to $1 or $2 million. It keeps making like $7, $8, $9, $10 million in its markets. So it could keep going. Another one of the big stories from this weekend was that Sony set dates for future films in the next couple years. So Sony's Marvel universe, even though Sony is sharing the character of Spider-Man with Marvel, you can see Spider-Man Homecoming. It takes place in that Marvel universe. They're going to have their own separate universe without Spider-Man, even though all the characters are Spider-Man characters. And they set a date of February 8th, 2019 for Silver and Black, which is a movie about Spider-Man villains, or they're really kind of anti-heroes. Silver Sable and Black Cat. And Silver Sable is a mercenary. Black Cat is known for influencing probability fields, thus producing bad luck for her enemies, which hence the name Black Cat. The film will be directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, who directed Beyond the Lights and Love and Basketball, which are both two critically well-received films. I've seen bits and pieces of Love and Basketball, and from everyone I know who's seen it, they say it's really good. I know my brother has told me to see that movie I don't know how many times. I'll get around to it. It's also, Silver and Black will be written by Christopher Yost, who co-wrote Thor: The Dark World and co-wrote the upcoming Thor: Ragnarok. I'm a little nervous by that because I think Thor: The Dark World is the weakest Marvel Cinematic Universe film out of, I think they've released 15 movies so far. No, 16 movies so far. And I think Thor: The Dark World is definitely at the bottom tier with movies like Iron Man 2 or The Incredible Hulk or something like that. Another interesting factoid is that the movie Silver and Black is actually in direct competition with the Lego Movie 2. It will be counter-programming a bit, but it's going to be interesting to see how it does against a movie like the Lego Movie 2. But with Sony's Marvel Universe, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make more adult films. Supposedly both of these, supposedly Silver and Black is going to be rated R, and it's going to be geared towards more adults. I'm interested because they hired a good director and they hired an okay writer. Because as long as they don't, I don't think with more minor characters, they shouldn't stick with just comic stories. I think stick to the essence of the character, keep the character true with, like, keep it consistent with the comics, but you don't have to take a story directly from the comics and adapt it into a movie. Make your own story and then have your characters react how they're written in comic books. Like, make them like that and just create your own story around it. I think that would be a lot more interesting. But the thing is, the first movie in Sony's Marvel Universe that's coming out next October, October 5th, 2018, is the Venom movie. They're making a solo Venom movie, which Spider-Man will not be in. And it's going to be rated R. They say it's going to be dark. And Tom Hardy is cast as Eddie Brock / Venom. And they hired Ruben Fleischer to direct. Ruben Fleischer directed Zombieland, Gangster Squad, and 30 Minutes or Less. What can I say? I like Zombieland. I love Zombieland a lot. 30 Minutes or Less, not very funny as a comedy film. Just not very. I didn't think it was very good. Gangster Squad, I honestly couldn't get through that movie. He tried to make a 40s gangster type movie, that intrigued me from the start. I remember seeing the first few trailers for Gangster Squad, and I was really excited. And then it came out, and it got destroyed by critics, and I ended up seeing it. I couldn't make it through the movie. It was rough. So, but I mean, I think Ruben Fleischer could do a good job with it. It's going to be rated R. Tom Hardy's going to be Venom. I think with a guy like Tom Hardy, who's very selective about the movies he's in, maybe he saw something in this movie that attracted him. I hope it's good, but what I don't have faith in, Sony hired these two writers, Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinkner. Jeff Pinkner wrote or co-wrote Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is basically the reason why Sony decided to cancel that series and share Spider-Man with Marvel, because the Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't do too well critically, and those movies kept making less and less money overall. He also wrote The Fifth Wave, which has a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 33% on Metacritic. And guess what? He also wrote The Dark Tower, which has an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 34% on Metacritic, and just probably lost a bunch of money for Sony. So I don't understand why Sony would have this guy write the first movie in their Marvel universe, their separate Marvel universe, if they're trying to make money with this thing. And another thing is, it's rated R. They want to make it gritty and dark and grounded or whatever. It's rated R. When you have a character like Venom, and supposedly the villain is going to be this guy Carnage, who's similar to Venom, well, they're both covered in this alien symbiote, and that's going to cost a ton of money. So what, you're going to make a rated R movie for $100 million, and you hire a writer who has written movies that have really hurt your studio. You're putting all this risk, and that's who you hire. And part of me is like, are they just making this rated R movie because, Deadpool was rated R and did really well, and Logan was rated R and did really well? Because it wasn't the fact that they were rated R, it was the fact that
They had great stories, they had great scripts, and they told a mature story. Like it was cohesive, and they told a more mature adult story. And those movies weren't huge budget movies. They actually cut down on those budgets because they were rated R, and because it was believed that the audience wasn't as big to go see those movies. So I'm hopefully, I'm cautiously optimistic about the Venom movie, because I am genuinely interested to see a movie where Venom is an anti-hero, and it's basically a bad guy fighting worse guys. Silver and Black, I'm interested in that movie too, just because it's different. These are minor characters, and I feel like when you have minor characters, you don't have to stick to the comics as much, because not as many people know that character. You can kind of do what you want with those characters and make your own story. You can make something kind of original and make something kind of refreshing. So I'm interested, but seeing who they got as directors, I'm more comfortable with that. Seeing who they got as writers, that's what makes me nervous. Just these guys as writers, they're not great writers. So we'll see. Sony also set a date for Sicario 2 Soldado, which comes out June 29th, 2018. This movie is the sequel to 2015's Sicario, which was one of my favorite movies. I saw that the weekend it came out in wide release. I actually went by myself to go see it, but it was well worth it. It is a great, if you haven't seen Sicario, go see Sicario. It was probably my second or third favorite film of 2015. Honestly, nobody expected a sequel to Sicario, because it is it's a very singular film. It doesn't really set up anything for future movies. It's just a thriller that's about the drug trade and the cartel on the Texas, Mexico border. That's basically it. It's pretty good, and they're not making this movie for a cash grab either, because Sicario made, I think, $88 million on a $30 million budget. They didn't make a ton of money on it, but the writer, Taylor Sheridan, who recently got nominated for an Oscar for Hell or High Water, which is, again, another great movie, he wrote a sequel to it, and he's like, hey, I want to make this movie. It's not going to be directed by the same guy. It's not going to be directed by Denis Villeneuve, because Denis Villeneuve is directing, or he just directed Blade Runner 2049, which comes out October of this year. And next year, he's going to be working on Dune, which is based on the 1965 sci-fi novel. And they also made a movie in 1984, which wasn't very good, but he's going to be focusing on, working on Dune. So it's going to be directed by Stefano Sollima, who is an Italian director, who he's directed, I don't know how many English language movies he's done, but everything he's done, I think he did a TV series called Gomorrah, and he directed a movie called Sabura, and they're both very critically well reviewed. So I'm super interested. Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro are returning for Sicario 2, but Emily Blunt isn't, which makes sense, because Emily Blunt's story, if you've seen Sicario, her story is wrapped up perfectly in the first movie. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to try and spoil anything, but it makes sense that she's not returning for this movie. The only question I have is, this movie comes out June 29th, 2018, which is 1 week after Jurassic World 2, and then 2 weeks after The Incredibles 2. The first Sicario was released in October of 2015. It was kind of given an Oscar baity release. It was only nominated for cinematography, but it was kind of given that release date in the fall. But I'm kind of curious, because how much money is it going to make? It doesn't seem fit for that heart of summer release date. And I understand Jurassic World and Incredibles and Sicario 2, those are three very different audiences, but I still feel like when you have a movie like Jurassic World, the first one made $1.6 billion. That means it appeals to tons of people, all types of audiences, which means it could bring in some of that Sicario audience as well. I still think Sicario is going to make money, but I feel like if they released it maybe earlier in the spring, where there isn't as many blockbuster movies, or later in the fall, or an August, September release, where you don't have as many high-profile movies, and you could make money by releasing a smaller movie there, because you'll have 3 weekends where there's this critically acclaimed movie when all the summer garbage is being dumped, but you have this one great movie, Sicario 2, that's coming out. Then it could work. I feel like that would be a good landing spot. But studios, they have big research teams that they try and find the best release date, but we'll see. the biggest thing is Taylor Sheridan, the writer of the first Sicario. He wrote the sequel. He wrote Hell or High Water. He wrote Sicario. He just had his directorial debut, this movie called Wind River, which is still in limited release. But he directed and wrote that, and supposedly that's really good as well. So honestly, that's what's gonna get me to the movie theater, is that writer, because that dude is really talented. Moving on, Sony has completely removed Bad Boys for Life, which is the proposed third film in the Bad Boys franchise. They have removed Bad Boys for Life from their schedule entirely. It was supposed to come out in 2018, but after director Joe Carnahan left the project, everything was kind of up in the air. They weren't really sure where they were going, which is a little sad because I did like Joe Carnahan as a choice. He did The Gray, he directed The A-Team, which I'm not a huge fan of The A-Team, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. He also directed Stretch. Stretch was on Netflix for a little bit. Stretch is just a nice, lean action movie. I mean, his directorial style is almost like this controlled chaos type of deal, and I think he would have been a much better director than Michael Bay. And I kind of like the first Bad Boys. I really don't like the second one because the second one is all over the place and it's like 2.5 hours for no reason. I think he would be a better choice than Michael Bay because I don't think he would try and do Michael Bay. He wouldn't have tried to imitate Michael Bay. And look, I don't like Michael Bay, but I can admit no one can do Michael Bay like Michael Bay. No one can do Bayhem like Michael Bay. I think they tried with a movie like Battleship, and it just didn't work. There's actually a video on YouTube called like Bayhem, or Making Sense of Bayhem. It's from this profile called Every Frame a Painting. If it's like 7 or 8 minutes. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's about what makes Michael Bay, like, it's just all about his style. And it's actually pretty interesting because he does have a definitive style that he uses in all his movies. And even though people have tried to replicate it, people can't. It's like the 360 camera turn, the pan up shots. It's pretty crazy. One thing I also thought was, is it possible that there was salary problems between the two stars, between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith? Because Will Smith probably demanded a hefty paycheck to be in Bad Boys 3, which would make sense. Will Smith is, even though he's not what he once was, there's still an audience that will go see a movie because of Will Smith. But I think with someone like Martin Lawrence, who really hasn't worked that much since, Bad Boys 2, with somebody like Will Smith, I'm pretty sure Martin Lawrence, he's a proud guy who's probably demanding the same amount of money as Will Smith. And I think the studio, someone like Sony, was probably saying that's not realistic because Martin Lawrence is not nearly the caliber of movie star that Will Smith is. So, maybe that could be it. I know they wanted to do a Bad Boys 3 and a Bad Boys 4. If it doesn't work out, I would just not do it. I think even if Michael Bay wanted to come back, I know if Michael Bay wanted to come back, they would do it because Michael Bay, his movies make money. They just do. But, it's been 14 years since the last one. No, just don't do it. Just let it go. You had Bad Boys 1, you had Bad Boys 2. That's enough Bad Boys. It's good enough. Anyways, Sony also released a few dates for smaller films. So frequent Breaking Bad director Michelle MacLaren will direct this film called The Nightingale. It will be her feature debut. I'm interested already because Michelle MacLaren she directed very good episodes of Breaking Bad, and among other things. But I definitely, you're getting another female voice in Hollywood, so, I'll see it when it comes out, January 25th, 2019. Also, a film called Holmes and Watson, starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, took that Bad Boys for Life release date, and it will be released November 9th, 2018. I don't know much about this Holmes and Watson movie, but I think you will get a ton of butts in seats if you're saying, hey, those guys from Step Brothers and those guys from Talladega Nights, they're going to be playing Sherlock Holmes and John Watson in a movie. So come see it. I think you're going to get my ticket most likely. And finally, before I sign off, I do want to mention one thing. So Barron's released this article called The Trouble with Netflix. And I'll put the web link in the description so you can click on it and read it for yourself. But I'm just going to talk about it a little bit because I know I talked about Netflix in the first episode and their reaction to Disney probably pulling their content from Netflix. So this article basically describes Netflix as a glorified distributor that is essentially accumulating tons of debt. And I'll read off 3 quotes from this piece. It says, "The service is so popular because it's an excellent value, but that's in part because it's priced below cost, financed by debt, which Netflix is able to take on because its stock price is so high. Even among the expanding universe of Netflix originals, top performers like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black are licensed. They are not owned by Netflix." And the last quote is, "There's only one example of an owned Netflix hit reaching a second season, and that's Stranger Things." So, and I didn't know this about Netflix either, but Netflix rents most of its content. Most of its original content, like Netflix originals, they didn't necessarily produce that show or movie. They're just a distributor. They paid a licensing fee to a production company in order to air that show on Netflix. So Stranger Things, Netflix actually produced that. Netflix put the money in to make that show. But shows like, House of Cards, that was a separate production company, and Netflix paid them a fee to first air that show on the streaming service. So shows like Daredevil, like those Marvel shows like Daredevil, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and The Defenders, which I think it's coming out this Friday. Those shows are produced by ABC Studios. Those shows are produced by Disney. But Netflix airs the shows on their service. So they rent most of their content. They also rent most of their streaming infrastructure. So any servers or anything that help them stream the shows, they don't own those. They rent those. Netflix has yet to generate any material free cash flow and has yet to turn a real profit. Now, you could compare this to Amazon. Amazon owns all their original content, like Amazon Prime Video owns all their original content, and is expected to generate $30 billion in free cash flow by 2020. Amazon owns and they run their own data centers, their own servers for their streaming infrastructure. And even though Netflix has yet to turn a profit, some people might argue, well, Amazon doesn't have huge profits either. Amazon has thin profits, but that's by design. Amazon, they make huge profits, but then with those profits, they build out their infrastructure. They keep buying more distribution centers. They might buy more data centers, more servers to build out their infrastructure so that their profits will be smaller. But it's almost like they control their profits. Also, when people pay, not many people solely pay for Amazon Prime Video. People pay for Amazon Prime period so that they can get free shipping and stuff like that. So when Amazon Prime Now comes, when Amazon Prime Now arrives and products are, able to be shipped within, in like 3 hours, more people are going to pay for Prime, the $100 a year. Thus, more people are going to have Prime Video. So Amazon might not have as much original content as Netflix, but Netflix is in way deeper debt, and Amazon has tons of free cash flow on hand that any debt they might have, if they are put in a situation where they need to settle their debts, they can. They have tons of liquid cash to pay for any debt. Also, as long as Netflix's subscribers keep growing, investors aren't going to care that they rent most of their content. But if a company like Disney, or maybe even Apple, because there have been reports Apple will make a streaming service, if Disney or Apple join the streaming industry, Netflix's subscribers could decline. Like, it is a possibility they could decline because companies like Disney and Apple, again, have large amounts of free cash on hand, so they wouldn't necessarily have to borrow money to build their streaming service. They could just build it, and they own all this stuff on it, and Netflix doesn't. Netflix is already almost $5 billion in long-term debt. And so Disney and Apple could come out and they could learn from Netflix's mistakes, perfect their own thing, and then come out with their own streaming services in, let's say, 2019, and Netflix kind of could be left in the dust. One more other thing is, so all these streaming services are probably going to be out. You could have 10 streaming services, and it's going to come to that point where to pay for all of them would be to pay for more than like your basic cable service. The whole point of cord cutting was that it was cheaper than paying for cable, and people aren't going to want to pay for 10 streaming services. So it's going to be survival of the fittest. What gives you the best product overall? And that's what you'll pay for. And Netflix is in a tough spot. And this could be something like Apple has been known to kind of take other ideas and just perfect them and just make them better. Back in the 70s or back in the 80s, Steve Jobs took a tour of Xerox PARC, and Xerox had the basic that, Xerox in the 70s, they had the technology to basically email each other, and they had the graphical user interface on their computer and a mouse. They had that in the 70s, and they didn't use it. They didn't try and market it or sell it or anything. They just had that in their offices. But Steve Jobs took a tour of Xerox PARC in the 80s, saw the graphical user interface, saw the use of the mouse and, point and click and all that other stuff, and he used it to build the Macintosh, which was huge. And he saw the ability to give that to the masses, and he saw the profitability in that. Now, Netflix has already seen the profitability in streaming, but Apple could perfect that. Apple could come in and basically say, we can do it better, and we're just going to replace Netflix. So, I mean, I highly recommend reading this article, because in 2 to 3 years, Netflix, while it might not necessarily be gone, Netflix, there's a possibility Netflix won't be the leader in streaming in 2 to 3 years, let's say. And also because I hear from other college students like, oh my God, Netflix, they're just doing it better than anyone else, or Amazon's nice, but it's not like Netflix, I mean, a company like Amazon is built for the long haul. They might not be developing as many original shows, but they're not going to have any financial trouble in the coming years, and so that's another thing. Netflix's subscribers, they do keep growing. They have over 104 million subscribers. They have more subscribers outside the United States than inside the United States. But if Apple and Disney come in and make a serious play, especially Disney with stuff like Marvel and Lucasfilm and ESPN and stuff like that, if they come in and they make a dent and Netflix's subscribers slow down, the growth slows down, the investors are going to start caring more that, hey, maybe stop paying these licensing fees for these shows, maybe cancel some more shows or take some more shows off the streaming service and start producing your own stuff. And once that starts happening, and Disney and Apple maybe start to make a killing, and the stock price starts to go down for Netflix, then they're really going to start hurting, and they're really going to start worrying. Because I keep hearing from, not only from college students, but also from like film pundits that, Netflix is killing it, with all the stuff they're doing. It's like they're committing a lot of money to a lot of projects, but nothing says that it's going to be profitable. They're going to make $100 million movie with Martin Scorsese next year. It'll probably be a really good movie, but in Netflix's model, is it going to be profitable? Martin Scorsese's last movie, Silence, was a $40 million movie. I think it made $14 million. I'm not saying that his movie, I think it's called The Irishman. Obviously, it's going to be a different way of measuring how much money will be made, because it's not going to be released in theaters. It's just going to be on the Netflix streaming service. But how interested are people going to be in that movie? So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But again, highly recommend read this Barron's article. It's called The Trouble with Netflix. Again, I'll put the URL in the description for you to read. But that's it for the weekend. Thanks very much. Peace.